Hi there. In this video segment, we'll be working with the Cybex leg curl machine. Now, how this differs compared to the Cybex leg extension machine is that we work primarily through the hamstring muscle groups. Now, this is going to be posterior muscles above the knee joint. Important to know where they start, actually, which is going to be the sits bones, which are going to be right here, part of the bone of the pelvis, lower part of the pelvis known as the ischial tuberosity. Now, all of those hamstring muscle groups start there and they make their way down the leg. Now, there is going to be a direct influence in the flexion or the bending of the knee, that is, on this machine, but it is also important to know that the hamstrings, specifically the long head of the bicep femoris, is involved with extension of the hip. Now, granted, that's not so important in this machine as we won't be really working it, but that long head is actually worked here on this machine. Not an extension of the hip, which would be this, but inflection of the knee. When you bring this leg upwards, and I'll explain this in more detail as we set our positions, you'll notice there's a bit of a stretch through the actual posterior leg muscles. That's the long head of that bicep femoris, the long head of the hamstring, that is, that you feel quite a bit of a stretch on. Now, being that it's in that stretch position allows you the opportunity to work all the way through that full range, like I said, through the knee, that is, right? And when I say full range of the muscle, we're really not able to get every single angle of it because it does have the ability to go from here and even back into here, which we will not be able to do with this machine. But now going into the more important thing is, why are we strengthening our hamstrings? Well, like on the leg extension machine where you work the quad muscles that work downwards to the actual knee joints themselves, is that we want to try to increase the structural integrity of the actual knee joint itself. Not just anteriorly like you would on the leg extension, but also posteriorly like you would here on the leg curl. So that's a super critical component to this, and why it's so important, why we're actually covering it. But also understand that you are indirectly working the calf muscles and some of the other muscles that run posteriorly in the knee, downwards. Now, not to get into the specifics of the anatomy on those, but they are going to be felt with this exercise just because of the direct impact in the force as we're pushing downwards with this. And I'll explain where at one point you might be feeling this. So, done with the anatomy, let's move on. Let's take a quick glance at the actual piece itself. Some things will look familiar when you compare them to some of the other videos that we've done. So the first thing being is right here. This is the range limiting device. This will allow us the opportunity to start at different angles of the actual knee joint, which is what's going to be influenced here, right? So if somebody were limited in the ability to be able to flex the knee, or when I say the starting position of the flexed knee, then you can adjust according to that. Maybe somebody has really tight hamstrings. Maybe it's somebody that never has explored and even tried to flex that knee under load in such an isolated position. So first things first, let's make sure we don't feel any discomfort with the knee when we're doing this one. We're going to actually cover on how to set up properly as well. So as far as other adjustments, we're going to have the seat position. We're going to actually have this here, which is kind of a bolster to support above the knees, that is, or the knee cap, better yet. And then we're actually going to have the calf res, we'll call it, right? But this is where we're going to be directly pressing downwards against that resistance. So as far as adjustments for our weight, just like on the other machines, top dial, 5-pound increments, and pulling that pin out, that's going to be a 20-pound increment all the way to the very bottom there on the stack. Now, once again, if I have it on a 0 setting on that top pin, and I'm running the pin out, I'm running on a 10-pound preset, or better yet, just the weight of the actual mechanism, right? So for somebody that's never worked this, you throw your legs on there, your legs actually might be heavy enough to push the weight down. So dial around, play with it, see what feels right for you to actually get a little bit of resistance. So let's do this. For demonstration purposes, I will start this one lightly. I'll keep it at 35. Now, setup. There's one thing here that looks very similar to the leg extension, and that's right here. This is the actual axis of the machine, what everything revolves around. So we're going to imagine we're treating this like our knee joint. But some of us are built differently. So I always like to say, instead of worrying about position of this is where we would like to have it, but sometimes, leg lengths being longer as far as the femur goes, we want to make sure that this pad is actually above the knee joint. So that's going to be your main consideration. We want to make sure that this, when we put it in position, is not crushing the actual knee. So before we go forward, I want to make sure that my seat adjustment is right according to that. So when I bring my legs up, this may not be comfortable for everybody. Some folks may actually have to start lower than this. So what you'll do is pull that pin out on the range limiting device and bring that a little lower. So this right here, I don't feel much as far as a stretch goes. What I like to say is you can do a quick test here, make sure that you don't have any back conditions. If you do, be cautious when you do this one. You can do one leg at a time, lifting up here, see what your range looks like before you try to do it with both legs. Holding on, and not just holding, I mean pushing. Imagine you're pushing your back into this, and try to see if you can lift both legs, fully extending the knee. Now, I have pretty decent motion, so this is about where I want to eyeball my starting position. So what I'll do is, I'll go ahead and pull this up, reach here, or if you want, you can use your foot, guide it up a little bit, all right? And that's about where I was earlier. So that's going to be my starting position for the distance. Now, there's another point that I forgot to mention, and that's this bolster here, where our leg will be resting on. We're going to actually bring this all the way back to position 5. I recommend this just like I did on the leg extension, being that the closer we can keep the resistance relative to the actual knee, then the less amount of shear force or friction is going to be created on the actual joint itself. Now, granted, it may feel easier doing it from here versus being down there, but we have to understand that the distance of where the resistance is relative to the knee can have a negative effect as well. Imagine it like this. I'll show with one leg. If I had this thing way up here, fully extending the knee, and I'm pushing down from my Achilles, right, back here, the tendon, or even my heel, I actually might be creating a lot of posterior stress through my knee. Not a good thing, right? So I'd rather bring it here where I have the meaty part of my leg to support, and being that it's closer, there's a lot less upward pressure through the actual knee joint. So now this looks okay, but it's actually not the best for me, being that when I press this down, it's actually going to push on my knee joint. So what I would do here is I pull this up, one click. All right, you may not know the number you're on, so you might be able to take a quick glance, but like I said, let's just focus on positioning, all right? That's the main thing here. And this actually looks pretty good for me. It feels pretty good. So I'm going to pull this out, and like a lot of these, if you try to pull the pin out, it may not just pop right out. You have to understand that that pin is going into a metal piece, and the weight of this right here, this mechanism, this arm here, is pressing down against that. So it doesn't make it as easy as just pulling it out. So use your other hand, grab underneath, feel how this can wiggle, and pull that pin out at the same time. Now this should be snug. Don't smash it into the legs, but you want it to be nice and firm, all right? I like a little bit of pressure there so that I'm able to make sure that I'm not going to be shifting and moving around. So weight is set, my range limiting device has been set, my bolster has been set down here, and also up here. I'm ready to go. But before I do so, a lot of times folks will say, well, what about the lower part of the legs? What about your feet? What are you doing with those feet? So I like to say personally is you don't really need to be thinking so much about the feet. You should be thinking more about the knee itself and everything upwards. So don't really try to focus so much on pressing through the feet or bringing them back. I'd say just let them be, okay? Now granted, if you wanted to pull the toes back, it's not gonna hurt you. Some folks say they'll feel more activation through here. Once again, it's your body, you can experiment. If I'm pressing through, what that's gonna do, it's actually gonna create some contraction through the lower leg, right? So I may feel my calves a little more because I'm plantar flexing through my ankle structure. And if I go down, I may feel more calves doing that, but once again, that's not why we're on this machine. So for now, the purposes of this to start and learn, just allow the legs to relax. Let's focus beyond the knee and back here. So a few different cues, things we want to focus on. You probably can't see it here, but as I stated with the leg extension, sometimes folks have the natural tendency to rotate their hips out, which causes the foot to kind of veer out. So what I'm noticing here with myself is that I do that naturally. So what I would recommend is rotating that hip in a little bit on both. Now, for some folks, this may feel like they're kind of pigeon toe. That would be an excessive inwards internal rotation of the hip. If you did that, you'd probably cramp up. So just don't let the toes veer out, rotate the entire leg inwards, and as a result, the foot may rotate it inwards. So once that's set, we understand that the articulation of the actual knee joint itself will be in line with the direction of force. I don't want my legs out here pressing down and then creating some lateral stress through the actual knee structure itself. So I've rotated in, I'm all set up. Now what do I do? As far as setup goes, People always think just grabbing these things are going to do the trick. But that's not the case, and I'll explain why. Watch what happens when I go down. I'll flex at the knee, my lower back starts to extend, and I can actually even slide down this seat. That's no good, okay? Because now I've just lost my position, and it's just not good. So we want to actually make sure that we're not just grabbing here. We want to actually make sure we're pressing against here. So I like to tell folks when I work with them to press and envision you're pressing yourself where you're flat against that pad. Now granted, you're going to have the natural curvature of your lower back. That's fine. If you wanted to, you can try to create a little bit of compression through here, bracing through your midsection while pressing. That may help kind of buttress and support you a little better. If we had a strap here, that would be the perfect scenario, but we don't. So we work with the way this machine was created, and we do the best we can with it. So I'm going to press, make sure that my back is flush against there. I'm going to make sure everything else is in line, and as I start flexing the knee, I want you to think down, which is what I'm doing, and back. Another cue I like to give is imagine you're driving your heel towards your butt. Slowly absorb and draw this up. Still pressing, okay, because it's really easy to start sliding here. And still staying in contact with that pad. You're never letting loose, all right? Squeeze, tight, 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 down and back. Focus and own the position, all right? When you get back there, it isn't just, camp out and just hold it like softly as get in this position. I want you to really draw it back there with squeeze all the way to the end. Focus on contracting those muscles and then slowly working your way back up. Now, you'll notice here that sometimes I need to readjust, and that will happen with this machine that, maybe after a couple repetitions, you might find yourself sliding. We're going to try to get some wedges, which are actually be really nice to be able to allow you to create a little bit of more of an upward angle to get you more situated back here. We will begin these to help improve this as far as the position goes of the seat itself. Some folks never have an issue, and some folks just stay away from this machine because they say that their lower backs hurt them. Main reason your lower back would hurt is, as I demonstrated earlier, what was going on. As I drew it downwards, my back was arching. You shouldn't be arching through your back as you're doing this. If you are, in many cases, it would be because you have too much weight going on, okay? So I'll do it one more time. Internally rotating the hips a little bit, drawing that inwards. I'm pressing against here. I'm flexing at the knee joint, going down and back, squeezing and holding that position. Slowly absorbing on the way up, and do multiple repetitions of this, see what that feels like. So that's the leg curl, very simple, right? Now, if you feel any stress through the knee joint itself, you can always bring it down a little bit lower. Maybe that'll change the position a little bit for you as far as how the hamstrings feel. Remember, being in a higher position is going to create more tension in the starting position. You'll feel more of a stretch with that going into the actual contraction of the muscles. So explore it before just giving up on it. One thing I really like to do if folks aren't feeling the contractility of the muscle is I could actually bring this to the down position all the way, and what I'll do is I'll work the end range of it. So what I mean by that is I'll take it to the end, I'll squeeze, and I'm still holding up against that pad, and then I'll bring it up just a little bit, and then I'll squeeze back again. And all I'm doing here is I'm trying to really work through the shortened range of that muscle group, right? Or these muscle groups, that is, because there's plenty working here. And as I do this a few times, I'm going to start feeling maybe a little bit of a pump. I might even start kind of connecting a little more with those muscles and really feeling it. For some folks that have never done this or not familiar with this, it's kind of like they're looking for something but that they don't know what to look for, right? So try that out if you're not feeling it, right? See what that feels like. Maybe that does help. Now, we've gone through the full range. We've actually gone through the shortened range. If, let's say, for instance, you only had one leg you were able to work with, maybe you got an issue going on with one of your knees, or maybe there's just a big deficit, some weakness on one leg, we can actually work one leg at a time, right? But I don't like to have it where one leg is down here because you're going to smack it with this. This is a nice aluminum rod back here. It will not feel pleasant. So you're going to have to improvise. And while pressing, I'm going to flex my knee. I'll keep my other leg up. It can come down as long as I'm not using it, right? Squeeze and hold that position. Nice and slow on the up, right? Do a couple repetitions with one leg. You can do it with the other leg as well. Same thing. Some folks will do this. I don't like to do this because it'll throw me out of alignment, right? So keep yourself in position, right? The other leg, no big deal. Keep it up here. You can let it ride down as long as I'm focusing primarily through the leg that I'm trying to work from. So another thing we can do is also, because you'll see a lot of times folks will launch the exercise. They'll go down with momentum, right? Down, right? They'll even break away from it, right? So they'll launch with so much momentum that they break contact from the actual device itself. So let's not do that. Try to stay in contact at all times and manage the resistance through all ranges of motion, right? So try not to use that inertia. You can go a little quicker if you'd like. Just once again, stay in contact. Focus on the muscles. If you're not feeling those muscles, you're probably going a little too quickly, all right? As time goes, you will find yourself in developing this intuitiveness. You can actually have a little more self-awareness of your muscles and what you're actually working, right? But that does take some practice. Okay, so once again, this is the Cybex leg curl. Quick recap, we did all our settings already. As far as positions go, we want to make sure that we're using the appropriate resistance while doing this, so make sure that we're not compensating and loading through the lower back. You shouldn't have any knee issues, any knee pain while doing this. If you do find it to be uncomfortable, come talk to me, come talk to one of the other trainers, see if we can find a different position or maybe a way we can modify it for you to help you out. Okay, I hope you enjoy this segment and get some benefit out of this piece of equipment. Remember, it's an important one, all right? Strengthening those legs is critical, and having the ability to do it in an isolated state like this is going to allow you to be able to pinpoint those muscles where with, let's say, free weights, it's in many cases a little more challenging, okay? Give it a go and let us know how it goes, okay? Have a great day. Take care now. Bye-bye.